Stephanie, and I'm so glad you decided to join us on YouTube today. We have an exciting message for you today, so make sure that you're engaged, leaned in, and taking notes. Also, be sure to like and share this video, and if you haven't yet, be sure to turn on notifications and subscribe so you can stay up to date with everything happening on our YouTube channel. Now let's jump into the sermon.
I want you to take your Bibles this morning, if you would, and I want you to go to the book of Isaiah, Isaiah chapter 9. And today I'm going to be starting a new series, and this series is going to last throughout the entire month of December. And the new series is simply called Jesus Is. I want everybody to say, Jesus Is. And that's what we're going to be unpacking this entire month, one of the most well-known prophecies about Jesus. The prophecy, by the way, was written, obviously, by the prophet Isaiah. Most scholars believe it was about 700 years before the birth of Christ. And I want you to just let that sink, let that marinate just for a moment. Think about it. 700 years prior to the birth of Christ, Isaiah prophesies about his birth. Come on, isn't that incredible? And so our primary focus will be on the different names that he describes Jesus in this particular passage. You know, and I want to transition here and talk about the application of this because as Christ followers, we celebrate the birth of Christ during the Christmas season. But I'm afraid that Christmas has become so commercialized that Christ is often left out. I said, Christ is often left out. Now, before you label me as a Scrooge, and I get an email over that on now, there is nothing wrong with celebrating Christmas. I want everybody to look at me today. There is not anything wrong with celebrating Christmas. After all, who doesn't like Christmas music? Somebody does, because every year in the month of August, we start singing about Christmas. That was sarcasm. About Christmas trees in little towns and flying reindeers and silver bells and Santa Claus. And who doesn't like Hallmark Christmas movies? Said no guy ever? No. We watch them every year. I mean, they have the same plot. This is what I don't understand. There's like hundreds upon them. We're scrolling through trying to figure out which one we're going to watch. They all have boy, girl, Christmas tree. You know, they all have, there's the same movie. You guys know what it's like girl alone, guy alone. They meet and fall in love. And for some reason, the guy has to leave. So he drives away only to drive 3 days back through a blizzard to get back to a girl who happened to be with her family, and they walk in and get married and live happily ever after. Come on, guys. I could be a movie producer. It is so fun. The reason they don't make new Christmas movies is they don't have to. It's because we keep watching the same ones over and over and over again as if we had never seen them before. Last night, I'm sitting on the couch, and Christy is watching Elf. And we start watching this movie, Elf, and it's a goofy movie. But anyway, we're watching it. Y'all know what movie I'm talking about, Christmas movie? We're watching this. I'll get back to the sermon here. We was watching this movie, and Christy's just laughing and laughing and laughing. And I thought she had never seen this movie before. And I asked her, I said, have you ever seen this movie? She said, oh, yeah, I watch this every year. That's why we don't have to watch Christmas movies right there. And then who doesn't like food? And John, thank you so much, because last week in John's sermon, he pardoned us from gluttony of eating for the holidays. Come on, give it up for Pastor John. It's still a sin, by the way. But who doesn't like receiving and giving gifts or watching football the entire day? Who doesn't like being locked inside with your crazy family for a few days or months or maybe even a year? You know, you just don't know being locked up with your family. Well, I got a spoiler alert for you this morning. This series is not about lights. It's not going to be about movies or music or parties. It's not going to be about trees. It's not even going to be about Santa Claus. Instead, we're going to slow down. We're going to take a closer look at the prophecy of the greatest gift that this world has ever received, Jesus. I want to set the backdrop for you, if I may. The people of God were living in a time of spiritual darkness. They were consulting with fortune tellers and cults instead of looking to God's word. The entire country was a spiritual, political, moral, and financial disaster, much like we're living in today. People were living in stress, they were living in fear, and their future seemed hopeless to them. And this is all prior to the birth of Christ. They simply had turned away from God and did as they pleased. Does that sound very familiar today? People are turning away from God and they're doing as they please. In spite of all of that, God had not given up on His people. God still had a plan for them. I want you to know this morning, and I sense this in my spirit since early this morning, that some of you may need to be reminded of that God has not given up on you, that God still has a plan for your life. Even in our sin and disobedience, God has not given up on us. And through the prophet Isaiah, God declares those walking in darkness will see a great light, and joy will replace gloom and doom. Aren't you thankful not only for the prophecy, but the fulfillment of the prophecy of Jesus? Because not only did He change the climate, not only did He change everything, the world that He was born into, He is still changing our world today as a result of His birth. Are you guys ready? I want us to look at this. I want to look at the words in which Isaiah describes who Jesus would be. It's in Isaiah chapter 9 and verse 6. Here's what Isaiah says. For a child is born to us, a son is given to us. Did you get that? For a child is born to us, and a son is given to us. The government will rest on His shoulders, and He will be called, watch this, Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, and Prince of Peace. And so this month, including Christmas Eve and Christmas Day, we're going to be talking about the names in which Isaiah uses to describe what Jesus would be like. So we're going to start with this morning, number one, Jesus is simply wonderful. Now, the more recent translations put wonderful and counselor together. But when I look back at some of the older translations of the Bible, there was a comma between wonderful and counselor, and that kind of caught my attention. And that's where I'm going to kind of base all of this on today. So we're going to separate the two this morning, wonderful and counselor, starting with wonderful. In Isaiah's time, wonderful was simply used in a different way in which we use it today. I believe we have reduced or we have lessened the true meaning of the word wonderful. We say things like ice cream is wonderful. And praise Jesus, ice cream is very wonderful. The weather is wonderful unless you live in Arkansas. Or sometimes we say it's wonderful to see you. Or we even use it in a sarcastic way sometimes when someone says, hey, I'm going to come and spend a week at your house. And we respond with, wonderful. Glad you're here. But the biblical definition of wonderful was not trivial at all. And I want to break this down for you. In Isaiah, in his way of speaking, wonderful, here's what it means. It means extraordinary. Exceeds all expectations. He goes on to say it's marvelous, miraculous, or beyond anything we have ever seen before. That's who Jesus is. He is wonderful. He is extraordinary. He is marvelous. He will exceed all expectation and is beyond anything or anyone that we have ever seen. Now, I want you to watch this because I thought this was interesting. In Genesis chapter 18, Sarah, 90 years old, well beyond the age to have a child. Abraham and her husband was even older, and God had promised them a child. Sarah said, well, I really have a child now that I am so old. The Lord's response was the same word used by Isaiah for wonderful. So in this case, the word was translated, is there anything too hard? Is there anything too difficult for God? We could read Jesus' name as, is there anything too marvelous, too wonderful, or too extraordinary for God? Is there anything too hard for God? Isaiah was saying this baby will be extraordinary, And this baby will not be just a natural baby, but this baby is going to be a supernatural baby that I'm about to bring into this world. From the very beginning, this baby is for us, and he is beyond us. He is wonderful, and there is nothing too hard, and there is nothing too difficult for God. Jesus' life on earth literally started as an impossibility. Mary, think about this, a virgin, all of a sudden was about to give birth to Jesus. So from the very beginning, his story starts with, this is impossible for this to happen this way. So from day one, Jesus redefined the word and the entire concept of impossible. I want you to know today that nothing is impossible with God. Now, intellectually, we know that. God can do anything, whatever, and whenever. After all, he is God. And if I ask you this morning, do you believe that God can do anything, perform any miracle in your life? And without even thinking about it, all of you, most of you would say, yes. We believe that God can do anything that he wants to do. We understand it in our head, but sometimes we struggle in our heart. So it's not our head knowledge, but it's in here that we struggle with this. Really? Sometimes we ask ourselves, nothing is impossible with God. I've heard people say to me, you haven't met my husband. You haven't met my wife. You haven't seen my situation. Pastor, I've tried everything. I prayed every prayer that I can think of. This one seems impossible even for God. How many of you have thought that before? Or even said that out loud, that even this is impossible for God. You don't know my child. I know some of them. You haven't seen the doctor's report. Or our human minds struggle to understand because a lot of things seem impossible to us. But just because they are impossible to us does not mean that they are impossible with God. If you're facing a seemingly impossible situation, hang on, because God always has the final word. Come on, I feel this in my heart this morning. Can you feel what I'm feeling today? That God always has the final word in your situation. All seem hopeless and even impossible before the birth of Jesus. Rome occupied the land of Israel. God's people needed a miracle, a deliverer. All of Israel were waiting for the Messiah. They were waiting for a miracle. Prophets for hundreds of years, like Isaiah, spoke of the soon coming Jesus. Can you imagine for decade after decade, life after lifetime, people hearing the Messiah is coming, the Messiah is coming, and yet no sign of the Messiah was anywhere. It was a very dark time. People prayed and they waited. They had a word from God, but no action from God. Have you ever been in that situation where you have heard a word from God, but God's not moved and nothing has changed about anything? But then suddenly one night, a holy and wonderful night that you and I celebrate as Christmas, the miracle came. God himself came as a baby, born in a manger, whose name is Wonderful. But at times it feels that we try to pull the wonder out of Christmas. Our sinful world does not want anything to do with this extraordinary power of Jesus. It's not part of their holiday. It doesn't fit into their narrative today. But I want you and I to know, as Christ followers, we cannot take the true wonder out of Christmas. Christmas is much more than about Santa Claus and going shopping and buying gifts. We are here to celebrate the miraculous birth of Jesus. And Isaiah said, he will be wonderful. And I declare to you this morning, he is still wonderful. He is extraordinary. He is beyond our imagination, and he can do the impossible. He did and still does the impossible in our lives. So this Christmas, look for the wonder, not in the music, not in the lights, and not even in the hope of a white Christmas, but look for the wonder in Christ. He won't be found in a Christmas tree. You're not going to unwrap a gift and you're going to discover the wonder of Christmas, the Christ. But look for the wonder of Christ this Christmas. And let's not leave him out. Come on, I said let's not leave him out. Isaiah said that he would be wonderful, fulfilled. He was, and he still is wonderful. Number 2, Jesus is our counselor. If there ever was a time that we needed a counselor, I would say it's during the holiday season. Can I get a witness in the house this morning? We need some counseling today. After all, we got a lot going on, starting with our family. Like who's coming over? How long are they staying? Many of us praying that they're not going to stay very long. Many of us are having unrealistic expectations at Christmas time. I mean, I get it. We want everything to be perfect. We want the food to be just right. The decorations, we want those to look beautiful in the home. The gifts we give and receive, we hope that everyone's going to get along at Christmas time. It's probably not going to happen, right? There's always going to be drama at Christmas time. That was funny. Thank you for laughing. And to add to that, there's the financial struggle and the pressure. It's a very expensive time of the year. And maybe you're not in the financial situation that you were in last year, or maybe you didn't get the bonus you were expecting this year. So it just adds a little bit of pressure onto already. Come on, I mean, everything that's going on in our world today, there's already a lot of financial stress on a lot of people. And then on top of that, we got to go out and buy the perfect gift for everybody. And we face the guilt sometimes. We can't buy or do everything that we want for our kids. And men, one of the biggest challenges that we have is we have to get something for our spouse. It's a good, friendly reminder from your local pastor today that you need to buy a Christmas gift for your spouse. So we ask, and she won't tell us what she wants. It's like we're supposed to know, we're supposed to sense and feel and surprise her with the perfect gift. It's just like we're supposed to hear from heaven on what the perfect gift is supposed to be. It's like we should never even have to ask. It's like you should already know what I want for Christmas. Well, in our home, it's not been that way because Christy is a very detailed person. And I have a very long list of everything that she hopes to get for Christmas. And she said, since you are a visual person, Pastor Honey, here's pictures of exactly what I want my gifts to look like today. So maybe you guys are going to struggle with that. I'm not going to struggle with that. I went to a store the other day and I told the person, I want one of those. That's pretty easy to do, isn't it? Come on, guys, that's good. You know, guys, if we only knew what she was getting us, wouldn't that help us a whole lot right there? Because when you think about this, if we get her a vacuum cleaner and she gets you a shotgun, whoo, I mean, no, and she's going to use that shotgun on you, that would not be good. Here's what I want you to know. Christmas can be a time of increased stress and pressure. I text two pastor guys this morning. I'm not friends with, but I know these guys, and they have recently lost their spouse. And for a lot of people, Christmas is fun, and it's fun for a lot of people. I get that. But for a lot of people, there's a lot of stress and there's a lot of pressure. And one of the things that brings a lot of stress to our lives sometimes is the loss of loved ones. And so I text those guys this morning and just say, hey, I want you to know I'm thinking about you and I'm praying for you because this Christmas is going to be different like any other Christmas that you've ever had. So I'm just saying there's added stress and pressure, and there's a reminder that we have lost loved ones. Just thinking about it has already, for some of you, you're ready to make an appointment with a counselor already. But in biblical, it's biblical, by the way, and it's wise to seek counsel and advice. I said it's biblical. It's wise to seek counsel and advice, by the way, from wise people, not stupid people. Many of you have gone to a counselor at some point in your life to work through a struggle, maybe in your marriage, to get some help with your finances or even your debt. When you need to deal with hurt or maybe something in your past or anxiety or low self-esteem or depression, whatever, you're struggling to work through something, it just makes sense to get some help. And when we get help, what do? We call a counselor. We go to a counselor and we sit down with them. And one of the things that I've noticed about counselors, one of the attributes that makes them a great counselor is great counselors are typically really good listeners. Right? They basically charge you $200 for an hour to just sit there and say nothing and listen to you tell about all their problems. But I'm not against counselors. I'm just saying they're good listeners. But Isaiah said that Jesus would be wonderful and he would also be a counselor for us. So visualize with me this morning that Jesus, think about how incredible, how wonderful, how extraordinary he is. He is our personal counselor today. Can you imagine Jesus as a counselor listening to your fears, your concerns? Watch this. In Isaiah's days, the word counselor meant one who has plans. A counselor had inside information about the future. Typically, this would be a government official who would tell the plans for what was ahead to the king. He knew what decisions the king was going to make, so the counselor would what? Give advice to the king about decisions that he needed to make. So a counselor was a very valuable ally to the king. With the help of a counselor, you could make decisions, not what used to be or what currently was, but what would be. Come on, do you get the connection here? Jesus is the counselor who not only knows your past, but has a plan for your future. He doesn't just have an opinion, but he has the answer for you. Not just an opinion, but an answer. Our wonderful counselor knows exactly what we should do because he has already made the plans. Jesus knows our future. He knows our past. He sees our entire story from the very beginning to the end. I want you to think for a moment, if you could sit down this morning and have a one-on-one counseling session with Christ, what would you talk about? If you could sit down and have the undivided attention of Jesus, one-on-one as your personal counselor for 1 hour, what would you discuss with him? Here's another question. When was the last time you had a one-on-one conversation with your wonderful counselor? Isaiah said he came to us and he would be for us. God sent Jesus to us and he sent Jesus for us. So if you were struggling with anything in life and all of a sudden someone said, you know what? I'm going to pay for you to go see a counselor. How foolish would it be for you not to take that friend up on that offer and say, oh, I'm going to go sit down and I'm going to talk to a counselor and I'm going to talk to them about my past. I'm going to talk to them about my fears and my anxiety. I'm going to talk to them about my marriage and I'm going to talk to them about who would not take people up on that? Well, I want you to know that God sent his son Jesus to this earth for us today. That you and I have access to Jesus at any time. We don't have to wait to come inside the building of a church to talk to Jesus. You can talk to him in the afternoon. You can talk to him when you're all alone in the morning and getting ready to go to work and you're sitting in a car all alone. I want you to know that he is our wonderful counselor and you and I have access to him anytime we want. Doesn't it always feel better to talk to someone who just simply listens? Have you ever said that about somebody? Just they may not have all the right answers. How many of you know that sometimes we don't even need the right answers? That we just need someone to listen to us? Well, that's what Jesus is. He is a wonderful counselor this morning. Someone that we can sit down with one-on-one and have a conversation with. Later, Isaiah chapter 65, verse 24 says, here's what God says. I will answer them before they even call to me. I want you to think about that. You know what that tells me? He already knows what you're about to talk to him about. I mean, students, can you imagine going up to your parents and you're about to ask them for something? Like, hey, can I go spend that with a friend? Or, hey, can I go spend $300 at the mall this afternoon? Maybe 100, sorry. You know, can I go spend some money? And even before you finished, they said yes. They already knew where you were going. Well, that's how our counselor is today. Before we can even get started with our conversation, he is already listening. He goes on to say, while they're still talking about their needs, I will go ahead and I will answer their prayers. While they are still talking, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to answer their prayers. In the original language, in Hebrew, this phrase, I will go ahead and answer their prayers. Here's how it's translated. He, referring to God, is paying attention. Did that not move you? The creator of everything and everyone is paying attention when you're talking with him. You ever been talking to someone and their eyes are everywhere but on you? You're just bored or whatever. Can't look at you. That's not how I visualize this. He's paying attention. So as you're talking to your counselor, dead stare into your eyes, he's letting you know what? I'm paying attention to you. I want you to think about it. Scripture in the Gospels talks about that he knows that even when a sparrow falls from the tree, he knows that. Well, if he knows that, how much more does he know about you? And how much more does he care about you? There's an old song. We're not going to sing it. It would have taken these guys weeks to find this song. There's an old song. It's simply called, Just Have a Little Talk with Jesus, for he will make it all right. Isn't that good? Just have a little talk with Jesus. And some of you this morning, maybe that's the word for you today, that you just need to sit down and just have a little talk with Jesus. Because even before you do, he already knows you're coming. He already knows what you're going to talk about. And he's already said, when you get here, I am going to be paying attention to what you say to me. Let's have a little talk with Jesus. Let's not take the wonder or the wonderful out of Christmas this year. He is wonderful. He is our counselor.
Thank you for joining us for this sermon today. If you made the decision to follow Christ, let us know in the comments below or at northwestchurch.tv. If God has encouraged you through this message, be sure to like or share this video with a friend. We'll see you next time.